On this episode of Locked On Lightning, the Lightning stay alive with a big clutch win in Game 6, force it to a Game 7 in Toronto. We'll talk all about that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for making us your first watch of the day. And make sure to like and subscribe to the pod. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. And also give us a follow and subscribe to the podcast on our YouTube channel. You guys have been doing fantastic with the enthusiasm, the support of the show. As always, I mean, that's the one thing we could always rely on, at least in Bolts Nation, is that you guys are going to come out, show the support for the show. So we really appreciate that. And the one thing we couldn't necessarily rely on tonight, even though a lot of people do, is the Lightning's ability to come up clutch in games right after a loss in the playoffs, moving up to 17-0. Over the last 3 playoff years following a loss. And I said on the last pod, I'm going to start off right now, is that that's not something that you could easily rest, just hang your hat on. As much as it's easy to say, well, they got this game in the bag. If anything, they've proven to us, other than the fact that they deserve to win cups, that they deserve to be in the spot that they are in, is that they are able to bounce back, that they come back with a vengeance, that Andrei Vasilevskiy plays absolutely huge in big games. And in this game, started off well. Andrei Palat gets on the board. It seems like with Andrei that we just go through these scoring droughts. During the regular season, I believe he went pretty much 5 months almost without scoring a goal. And this is his 3rd goal in the playoffs right now. So, I mean, great job by him to get on the board, be aggressive early on by Andrei, unassisted on this one as well. He had 4 shots in this game, which you'd love to see from a guy like that. My biggest criticism of Andrei this year, as well as the playoffs, is that it seems like you could go an entire night out there and not even notice he's on the ice. And I feel like, at least for me, when a player goes a long time without being noticeable or doing anything really noticeable, not saying that he's not doing the things he's supposed to, but you want to see a guy at least be noticeable, notice the name and number on the back of his jersey. And Andrei tends to sometimes disappear. And maybe a part of that has to do with the fact of he plays on a line with 2 of the most talented players on this Lightning team, and Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov. And I spoke about it early on in the series. I want to say after Game 3, I was talking about how desperate were we going to see Jon Cooper, where Jon Cooper doesn't really like to mix up the lines as much as one would think. Different coaches have different preferences with the way they throw things out there. Some coaches are like, if it ain't broken, don't try and fix it. Others are like, well, we got through the whole season with this line, so we're going to stick with the guys that got us here, which is understandable. But at the same time, push comes to shove, you gotta at one point fix things and get things together and really maybe sometimes mix things up, because that's the kind of thing that could really help this team or just help a team take things to another level. And in this game, we saw it late in the game, how desperate Jon Cooper was, and that was putting Nikita Kucherov, Braydon Point, and Steven Stamkos all on the same line. And we'll see him do this here and there. We've seen him do it on the power play. That's one thing, which is why it's also frustrating to see the Lightning struggle the way they have throughout this entire series on the power play. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm just going to focus on tonight's game or yesterday's game. I'm recording this at 3 a.m. in the morning. Took a while for me to kind of register what went on this game. But listen, all I could say to really sum up this game, and we'll talk about some of the things that happened throughout the game, of course, but really to sum up this game, this was what I was looking from this team all series long, and not only all series long, but all season long. Today was probably one of the few times this season where I could safely say the Tampa Bay Lightning looked like a championship team. They looked like a team, like the teams we saw in the bubble, like the team we saw last year that beat the Montreal Canadiens in 5. This ability to fight, I mean, this is the team that we saw get stretched to 7 by the New York Islanders, fight a tough series against Columbus, fight a tough series against Boston, Florida, Carolina. This performance that we saw last night or tonight or whatever you want to say, that was vintage Bolt hockey. That is the hockey that I really feel has been missing from this team all season long. And it's what it came down to was something that I've been talking about for a while now. And that was doing the small things right. Doing, not worrying about the big plays, just worrying about playing your game, playing the game the right way. That was making the appropriate passes at the appropriate times, not holding on to the puck. And there was instances that we saw that quite a bit. Mikhail Sergachev has been someone that has been really a player on this team that has kind of done that to a fault. He's been almost too aggressive or too patient at times to where, like we've seen a number of times early on in this series, him taking a shot from the blue line, it gets blocked, ill-advised shot, and it leads to a breakaway. And I believe the 2 times it happened, it resulted in a breakaway goal. Victor Hedman, not doing the little things, not doing the things that we saw him win a Conn Smythe for, not being aggressive. In this game tonight, did a fantastic job. 4 shots on goal. Didn't result in any points, but like I've said in the past, when Victor Hedman is aggressive on the offensive side of the puck, because we all know what he could do and does do and is capable of doing on the back check, when he kind of takes his game to another level and he becomes a force to be reckoned with on the forecheck, and just on the offensive side of the puck, he is the best defenseman, not only on the ice, but he is the best player on the ice when that happens. And what that does for this Lightning team, and I've spoken about that with Nikita Kucherov, and I've spoken about that with the things that Ryan McDonough does, especially the blue liners on this team, because we have the superstars in Stamkos, Kucherov, Point. We have the budding superstars in Alex Killorn, Ross Colton, the vets, and Corey Perry, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and Pat Maroon. But like I've stated on this show since pretty much day one, the inception of this show, that when the Lightning blue liners are aggressive offensively, you really see a different side of this team and an elevated side of this team, that when they do that, they are the best team on the planet, 100%. Every blue liner tonight, except for Zach Bogosian, because that's just not his game. He compensated in other ways, 4 hits and 1 block in 60 minutes of ice time. Everybody had 2 shots or more. Obviously, like I said, Victor Hedman leading the way with 4 shots in that regard. But what a fantastic game tonight. We'll talk about that all of that, some of the little things that I noticed, some of the things the Lightning need to just touch up, get ready for Game 7 on Saturday night. We'll talk all about that more, but first I want to talk about our first and only sponsor of this episode, and that is BetOnline.net. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And if you're on YouTube, you are watching us and you are staying here. And if you are listening to us on audio platform, you're joining us right back. Thank you very much for joining us through the break. And once again, what a fantastic win last night at home. I was worried about this game. I really just, I felt after the way the Lightning fell in the last game. I just feel like something had to give with this team, that the Lightning couldn't just sustain this back and forth with Toronto. I mean, what else is there to say about this team? They're everything and more than I expected out of this team. And I even stated it before the series started that Toronto needed to, regardless of if the Lightning came out and played the same exact hockey that we saw them play all season long. And that's what we've seen for this entire series up until Game 6. Because like I stated in the first half of the episode, Game 6 was we finally saw the Lightning make that leap to what we know they could play to in the quality of their play. Now, granted, like I said, there are certain odds and ends that need to be tied up, but we'll get to that. But really, what I said was the Maple Leafs needed to finish up the series quick, because the longer, and I've spoke about this with my Locked On NHL national show host Chris Basili of Locked On Avs, and we've said, whether it be with the good teams or the teams that you don't really expect, like what's going on in the Los Angeles Kings series with the Edmonton Oilers. They had a chance to close it out, and they couldn't get the job done. The Oilers facing a Game 7, and now you're leaving Game 7 up to chance against two of the greatest players on the planet. But the longer that you keep an opposing team in the mix, the harder it's going to be to put them away, because with every game that they win to stay in the series, it is going to gather so much momentum for this team. And you may not see it in the high flying play of a team. I mean, we've seen it over the last couple of years. We've seen it with certain teams, not necessarily flashy level of play, not exactly a pretty, what one of my favorite commentators in the sport of hockey, Jeff Merrick, likes to say, a low calorie type of hockey. And that's what we saw tonight. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy. Yes, there were 7 goals. There were 7 goals scored in this game, one of which in overtime. But this was the first time, and I think really, as well as Game 5, the last 2 games are what I wish would have happened the entire series, because I felt like if we finally got to that level of hockey where the first 4 games were just absolute madness. And that style of hockey that we've seen in the last 2 games, 5 and 6, have played exactly into the Lightning's hands. I don't expect the Lightning, just the way they play in the playoffs. I mean, unless they're playing a lesser team, like, let's face it, in the Stanley Cup final last year, the Montreal Canadiens, they're just the young team that had some lucky bounces here and there, lucky calls. They caught some fire at the end to get into the final. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're talking about David versus Goliath there, with Goliath coming out on top. But this is what playoff hockey is supposed to be, and that's why I was mostly frustrated because I felt like, and even even the Maple Leafs, uh, were just not on that level. They weren't playing the game the right way in terms of how you should approach a hockey game in the NHL playoffs. And the Lightning were trying to get to that point, but their play, you could tell, wasn't wasn't geared towards the style in which the Maple Leafs were playing. And finally tonight, the numbers justify it. They finally, I feel like, if there was ever a better time for playoff hockey to finally really show itself in the style of play, it's Game 6 in an elimination game for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Uh, 68 shots on goal total in this game at the Lightning, beating out the Maple Leafs by 2 in that category. Maple Leafs 53% in the faceoff circle, the Lightning 47. Early on in the game, they was super frustrating, and that has been really the key to Toronto's success throughout this entire series, other than forcing over turnovers and bad spots. Being able to control the puck in the faceoff circle and keep hold of possession and really just frustrate the Lightning. And the Lightning struggled early on, but you saw guys like Anthony Cirelli, who I mean, we have spoken in detail about how good Anthony Cirelli is on both sides of the puck. Um, he was 33% tonight. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was 71%. You got Ross Colton with 50, Stamkos with 53. He goes through these hot and cold sessions where sometimes he just cannot win a face-off to win his life. And then there's other streaks where he is one of the best. And tonight he did a fantastic job. Anthony Cirelli really was all over the place there. Like I stated before, Andre Palat, you go through stretches where, he doesn't have to put up the stats. He just has to be everywhere and the game will flow naturally. Where with Anthony Cirelli, I feel like with him, and I've spoken about this with Ross Colton in a way, with Anthony Cirelli, he kind of is always everywhere, which is great. You love to see the energy. You love to see the pep in his step. But his problem, I feel like he's everywhere and he feels like that should be kind of paid off on the scoring sheet for his efforts. And obviously that doesn't always happen. And then you sometimes see him get frustrated. Not all the time. There are little spurts and little moments during the game where you kind of see that. And glad to see Cirelli playing with a ton of momentum, a ton of energy. I mean, as always, because that's really something you definitely needed, especially from a player like that. And what you saw in this game from him, fantastic shorthanded goal in the second period. I would have to say, maybe I'm just being a little biased here, but goal of the year. Well, definitely goal of the playoffs. I don't know about anybody. This might be a little bit random, but the first thing I thought of when I saw that goal and they kept showing the replays and all that was Blake Coleman's goal from, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 years. Yeah, it was 2 years ago in the bubble where he kind of he got tripped, or he got tripped on the breakaway. I forgot who they were playing, to be honest. I think it might have been the Bruins, or it may have been the Islanders. And he tripped and he just flung it forward and went past the goaltender. I think it's the Bruins now that I'm thinking about. But yeah, every year, and that's when you could kind of tell a team is special and things are starting to roll their way if they aren't already. It's just little moments like that. And I've spoken on the pod before how really that's what it comes down to in the span of a playoff run is all it takes is a lucky bounce, a lucky call, a good play along the boards where it squeaks out to a guy all by himself in front of the net, and the guy's going to roll. But going back to the play that I saw tonight from this group, fantastic showing all around. We haven't even gotten to Andrei Vasilevskiy yet. I mean, he was just vintage Vasilevskiy. I really just fantastic job. I mean, he's one of those guys, and we've spoken about this with Kucherov many times. just when you think he can't cease to amaze you, he goes out and does something spectacular. He plays spectacular, and it's like, oh my God, thank goodness that this guy is on our team and we don't have to face him X amount of times per year, especially if he's in the division. So, fantastic game up from bottom to the top. And glad to see that the for the most part, the refs kind of swallowed their whistles. There were some ridiculous calls, and we'll wrap things up with that in just a bit. But first, let's take a break. So if you're listening to us on a podcast audio platform, you are coming back from the break right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, you stuck with me for a hot second. So yeah, some of the calls in this game, there were certain moments, I'll admit, I was just shaking my head. I believe it was the Nick Paul and the Nick Paul embellishment call, 16 minutes in, which doesn't make sense to me if you're calling a penalty on the other team for the same exact play. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Justin Hall got called for interference on Nick Paul, which really, I mean, I'm not going to nitpick here, but I guess should have been, off the top of my head, just from the way Paul fell, I assumed it was going to be a tripping call. I mean, interference, it's 2 minutes regardless, so it doesn't really matter. Not really. But an embellishment call in the playoffs, I mean, we've seen this play, whether it be with for the Lightning or against the Lightning, or even in any hockey play. We've seen obviously he fell for some reason. And my reasoning on that is, if you're gonna call, you can't call both. You gotta call one or the other. And I think everybody could agree, if you've been watching just the Lightning series, or if you've been watching this series, other series around the NHL, it's been every series. I've tried to watch at least one game through every playoff series that has been going on thus far. And I've noticed that just terrible calls. I mean, I understand it's very hard to be an official in the National Hockey League, but at the same time, I mean, come on. Like, this is just brutal. This is absolutely brutal. I don't know. I can't imagine if it's a reliance on instant replay. It can't be like that. But that's the other thing. And I was watching the game with someone tonight, and I was saying, like, how I feel like the number of calls or the number of times we have to go to instant replay, whether it has been in this series, which hasn't really been often, but in other series around the NHL, and if the Lightning do advance, hopefully they do Saturday night in Game 7. I'm sure the Lightning are going to get burned on a call once or twice in the future as they progress through the playoffs. But I just don't understand. I just don't get it. I just think that, especially, like, if you're going to call what we saw through games 1 through 5, if you're going to heavily call it, and we have to assume the refs are calling a lot of calls just for the sake of kind of keeping things even keel, which is understandable, like if it was game 1, but the fact that we're game 2, game 3, game 4, like, we shouldn't be in games where we have 16 penalties unless there's a lot of scrums, which for the most part, I mean, you've had the extracurricular activities in the series, but I mean, that's still like a little egregious. But I don't know. There was some questionable calls. I mean, there was also, I can't even complain because Nick Paul gets the embellishment call, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, who knows what the refs were thinking, and we all know it, that there's going to be moments where refs will go over to the bench and be like, my bad, that I messed that up, and then get a call back for you later on. And I feel like we got that on the high sticking call from David Kampf on Cal Foote in the third period, which ultimately gave the Lightning some momentum. And then later on, Alexander Kerfoot high sticking against Victor Hedman, which was completely a clear-cut call of high sticking. But the Lightning did get a good call in their favor at that point in time on the Cal Foot call. So, I mean, you're going to, like I said, the playoffs are all about lucky bounces, lucky calls. And I understand why Maple Leafs fans would be upset about this. Oh, and by the way, if you're listening to this on the audio platform, I am breathing heavily. My allergies are absolutely annihilating me right now, so I apologize for that. But I mean, great game all around. It wasn't exactly a clean one in terms of the officiating. There were some weird, questionable things, obviously, like we spoke about. Great game, top to down. Vasilevskiy played fantastic. He really kept the Lightning in this game when things really started to fall apart. In the I want to say it was the second period, or it was the first. I'm like drawing a blank right now. I believe it was the second period when the Maple Leafs scored all those goals late within the last, I want to say, minute 45. Tavares scoring twice, not only to tie the game but to take the lead, which was, to be honest, I really thought that was it. I really thought there's no way this team is going to be able to gather that much more momentum to be able to get back into this game. I feel like with the energy out of the building, just the defeated look of Vasilevskiy, for this team to come back, especially after that, to end a period and play the way they did for the rest of the game and take it to overtime and win and extend the series to a game 7, win or lose. I'm proud of this team in that scenario. To be able to send it to overtime after that, I mean, that's a huge deal. And that just proves how experienced and how good this team is, not only talent-wise, but in terms of motivating themselves, motivating each other. And they completely deserved to win this game, especially after Kucherov scoring the game-tying goal late in the third period. So, yeah, I mean, I'll talk about this more in the next episode, but if the Lightning could capture just maybe like an ounce of what they did in this game and bring it up in Toronto in Game 7 at Scotiabank, because we all know it's going to be a very tense night Saturday night. But if the Lightning could capture just a little bit of what they did in this game and take it with them up north, I would say the chances of them advancing to the next round of the playoffs are very likely. So we'll talk about that on the next episode. Once again, go ahead, like and subscribe to the pod. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. And we will be back later on to talk about Game 7. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.